Hello, everyone, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, and Justin Trudeau's Tinder profile. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Communal Conversation. I'm here with my guest, Dovi Siderson. More on Dovi in a minute. First, we got to hear from our sponsors, as always. I know it's getting pretty predictable, but I mean, you guys hear podcasts in general. They all sound the same. So this week's episode of the Communal Conversation is brought to you by our amazing sponsors over at EV Direct. EV Direct is the home of the Evolute, a small multi-user electric vehicle charging system for condominiums. Go electric or go dig for oil. More on our sponsors in the mid-break. Welcome to the Communal Conversation, Dovi Siderson. Happy to have you on.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, so you and I met by happenstance.
I guess so, yeah.
We both work for the same Jewish organization, and we both advise, mentor children. What's the exact label? I'm not sure.
I don't know. We're advisors. Yeah, I don't know exactly what we do.
Yeah, we're still trying.
Good though.
We're still trying to figure it out. It's great. It's great. But you and I made a bit of a connection doing some advisor training. And here you are on the show.
Yeah, well, that lady was rambling on, and we just started texting each other on the Zoom chat.
Right. We were sitting in one of these conference calls, and they had a guest speaker, and of course, guest speakers are always preeminently interesting.
Right.
So we naturally listened to every word by not listening at all.
Right. I mean, like, some of their guests were great. Like, I love some of the guests, but like, some people came on and were like, it's really important to have a healthy social environment. I was like, okay, like, why am I signing up for this? Like, why would I come listen to that for an hour?
Yeah. Oh, those were. I remember those. But that made us have a bit of a connection, and we've been talking about doing this for a little bit. So, Dovi, why don't you tell us who you are, where you've been, what you're doing?
So I'm Dovi, or Dovi, really. It's hard. You can call me Dovi though. It's fine. But like, most people, like at home in Edmonton, people call me Dovi.
Okay.
And that brings me to where I'm from. So I'm from Edmonton, which is a very small city. Well, it's not really a very small city by Canadian standards, but I guess by world standards, it's a small city. About 1 million people. Very small Jewish community though. And I grew up here. I went to Israel for 1.5 years until COVID hit. And then I've been back here ever since. I was planning to go back to Israel in the winter, like, of 2020, December 27th. And then, like, I booked my ticket finally after so much deliberation. And, should I go to Israel? Should I stay? I booked my ticket, and then they canceled all incoming things to Israel until, like, right after Pesach. So that whole span was just taken. And then by the time I could have gone, it was like you only have a month, 2 months until the summer. So I just stayed. But I'm going to go back for Elul. So as far as where I'm at right now, I'm in yeshiva, and I'm also taking my psychology degree online through Athabasca, which is an Albertan online university that's like they were way ahead of the times. They were doing it online, like in 2015, I think. Like
that means the quality of education is probably better.
Yeah. It's good. No, thank God. Like, there's a lot of people that do these online universities. Like, I don't want to name names, but like in the States that are just, who knows what they are. If you can get credits for going to yeshiva and not, if you're learning, I understand, but if you can go to yeshiva and just go to the beach every day or whatever, and then get a full year worth of credits, right? But but thank God this is like a fully accredited proper university. It just happens to be online. So
no, that's good, because what happens is with a lot of universities, especially mine, you have a lot of teachers that are just forced to do online, and they don't really know how the system works. But if you have a college or university that's already set up with online, the structures for so long, that's obviously going to be a lot better. Yeah.
I mean, I think, like, I'm happy that I can do it, so I can be in yeshiva, but it's definitely different than actually being in like a proper learning environment.
100%. So what's that like, still juggling yeshiva and course load?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't had to do it properly yet, because the past year I was home because of COVID. So I haven't really had to do the yeshiva like full time or part time even, really. I haven't had to, I had to do it like when I could,
Yeah.
But so next year, I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm hopeful, because the college work is not too time consuming that I can't do yeshiva also. So
that's good. That's a dual curriculum.
I'm not taking neuroscience, or I'm taking psychology, right? So
right. Yeah. No. Yeah. You're not taking. You're taking a semi-real science. Neuroscience is the real science, and psychology is like.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a science.
You think like that. I'm happy you think like that though, because a lot of people don't appreciate that.
Yeah. Listen, I recognize that psychology is sort of a default major for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people just end up in psychology because they don't really know what they want to do.
Exactly.
And that's totally fine. And honestly, psychology on a base level, I understand why people would jump immediately into it, but there are different levels of difficulty to that sort of stuff, right? Like I'm pursuing my PhD doctorate in psychology. I want to be a clinical practitioner, right? That's a little different from someone just taking a 3-year psychology degree and working at 7-Eleven, right? It's
right, oh, for sure, yeah. No, I mean, you're an undergrad still? You're still an undergrad?
Yeah, I just finished my second year.
Oh, nice. So, I mean, I plan to hopefully. I want to go to med school and go to psychiatry eventually, because I recognize that psychology is not like, I feel like if you really want to pursue psychology, you have to pursue psychiatry.
Yeah.
Like to a certain degree, meaning, and I'm not bashing on people that pursue psychology, because there's a whole, just like anything, right? If you have a complex system, so the things at the top of the system, which are less complex, there's still stuff there that needs to be dealt with, right? Of course. You know, so it's not, but like I happen to be interested in like more of like the biological foundations, whatever, that interests me a lot. I'm kind of doing the psychology degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do in the beginning. But now that I've really enjoyed psychology and I want to pursue it, but I'm like, I think I want to try to go to med school and pursue it in that direction. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's a long journey. I mean, I'm with you there. I also will inevitably end up in med school, I assume.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. No, I mean, to get a full PhD, I'm pretty sure I have to do that. But actually, I'm sort of weighing my options between. There's the option of taking a PsyD instead of a PhD. I don't know if you know what that is. But for those who don't know, a PsyD is a sort of alternative to a PhD, where PhD is a lot of testing, research, labs, and being behind the scenes on that sort of stuff. And a PsyD is a lot more writing focused and also face-to-face counsel focused. It's like a lot
clinical basis.
Yeah. It's a lot more focused on actual face-to-face interaction. And I think I'm better at that anyway. As fascinating as research is, I started a podcast called The Communal Conversation because I tend to like to communally converse with people, right?
Right.
So I think
I 100% feel that.
Yeah, I think a PsyD might be better suited for me. The only problem is there's not a lot of programs in Canada for that sort of stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I do want to move to Florida long term, so that definitely helps.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've been for the last long while, I've been bouncing back and forth between psychology and psychiatry, and just thinking like, what do I want to do? But I think psychology, if you go down that route, that's a super cool route. Like I'm not even like, psychiatry is kind of like the current mood that I'm in. I'm thinking like, I think that I'm going to try to make sure that I do the proper prerequisites so I can go to med school.
Right.
But like, I definitely appreciate the psychology.
And there's definitely a lot of crossover with those two things. I mean, they're essentially this, how do I say this? They're the same path with different results.
Yeah.
So
it's cool that you're interested in the psychology though, because like a lot of people just take these things, like we said, people take them because they don't know what to do. They take them because they want the job. But like I am fascinated, and I know you are too, by like the psychology itself, by the ideas that come up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Any effort to explain humanity, I am automatically fascinated in, because humanity is famously unexplainable. We do random stupid things all the time and constantly shoot ourselves in the foot over and over and over historically. Yeah. And I don't know. I find this sort of, for the record, actually something I dislike about psychology, and I know this is crazy, but as much as I love psychology, something that I'm not too fond of is putting people in boxes and making generalizations on groups of people, and not even in like a racial sense or a group statistic sense, but just in a general sense of, because it says this on this paper and I have tested you in this way and that way.
The DSM-5.
Yeah, right. You will automatically come out like this or that. And I just don't think 100%. People are that predictable. I think there are signs to certain things, and there are definitely metrics that are measurable. But the overall movement to put people in specific boxes, like your personality is this type or this type.
Right. But I think that the actual theories that like of the people who wrote them, they were never meant to be like that. Like, no. I don't think that people, like, who's that shallow minded, Right. Nobody.
It's people who take those theories and then, because us humans, and every time I say that, I sound like, Mark Zuckerberg, some sort of android. Us humans are constantly searching for answers to literally everything. We always want the answer to everything all the time, and we don't want it later. We want it now. Right.
I want it right now.
And because we're so desperate for expedient answers, people will use these theories and labels to explain things they don't understand, right?
Yeah.
And this happens in every area in life. In religion, right? Like people a lot of people in religion accept that there's not specifically tangible answers right in front of them, right? Whereas people who are not as religious and a lot more non-faith based, they need the answers to everything in science immediately, right? And that dichotomy is definitely depends on person to person. I don't want to make any generalizations, but because people are so desperate for answers, it makes them more likely to use these labels and theories in a shallow-minded way.
That's what you think it is? I think it's desperation for the answer?
I think so, because that's honestly what anxiety is. Anxiety in general is us not knowing the answer to what is going to happen, right? Is us framing all these bazillion possibilities of everything going wrong in every possible way, right? Because we don't know that it's going to go right. We don't know that what we're about to face or what we are facing is going to work out okay. So this desperation for answers makes us do a lot of things. A lot of humanity in general is driven by, let me get the answer to this right away. We all want to know the answer to things. We don't like not knowing things.
Right.
Yeah.
So people, so you think, yeah. I mean, I think another element of it is just like there's a basic tendency in human nature to grab onto things that have the potential to divide and to like milk them. And I think that might be true in like across the board sense, meaning it's not anything to do with people searching for answers necessarily, or people that have like political opinions or that want the best for their family. Right. And and there's just like a certain aspect where it's like, if I can grab onto this ideology, this liberal ideology, this conservative ideology, or this idea that explains why I'm different than you, and I can milk it, and I can milk that difference between me and you, I think people love that. I just heard Joe Rogan said a few days ago, like, there are people out there that just love, and I know you probably don't want to talk too much about the coronavirus, like restrictions and whatever, but there are people that just love being locked up, and they just love it. They want it. So I think sometimes like when like you hear these big ideas from these great psychologists about like how, like, let's say Erik Erikson, like the 8 stages, the eight crises, right, of development. So one of them is like industry versus despair, I think, right? Or industry. No, that's the last one. Industry versus, what is it?
Oh, shit.
Industry versus.
I'm a psychology major. I should know this.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like being able to leave your environment and being an individual, and like being industrious or being locked up to like your environment, whatever, like not being able to leave your home and becoming an individual. It's like a teenage crisis. I like, when I was reading that, I was thinking like, yeah, like it's so easy to just take this and go, oh yeah, my parents, like they messed me over. They didn't let me have enough industry, and that's why I have this terrible life. People like to take these ideas from from great theorists, great thinkers, and just use them to create like this, I don't know, victimhood, or just a difference between me and you, that this is why you're like that, I'm like this, and we're incompatible. So I don't know.
I think you're pointing to two very, very good points, Oliver. I think you're pointing to two very specific tendencies of humans also, aside from answer seeking, and that's conflict and victimhood. Victimhood is a little more complex, and I've definitely talked about it more on the show. But to address conflict first, you're right. People do search for differences among each other for various different reasons, right? But there is some reason that politics or religion or ideology is so dividing among people. It's because people are driven to be, how do I say this? To know that they are virtuous, that they know the answers, and anyone else who doesn't agree with their answers is doing something wrong, right?
Right.
Now, I don't want to generalize this to all people, because I know plenty of people that are not like this. And I myself, I try to be, it's not to pat myself on the back, but I try to be open to all ideas. And I don't think that I'm 100% right in anything. I'm sure you agree with that as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. You're not an ideologue. You don't have ideologies that you hold strong to. Right. I believe are the absolute truth.
I have beliefs that I hold strong to, but
you're not convinced that they're absolute truths, and I'm less than you for disagreeing with you.
Exactly. No. So that second point is actually what I wanted to talk about, is that people have this sense that if you disagree with them, you're lesser, you're inferior, or which underlyingly means I'm superior to you because I have the right opinion, you have the wrong one. That has been a human tendency since the dawn of time. Conflict is very innate in us. First of all, I would say that people who completely engage themselves in stuff like politics, but not just reading the newspaper and knowing what's going on. That's what I like to do, right? But actively, constantly debating with people, yelling at them, posting on their social media. I would say they've they've created their own meaning in life through conflict. What I mean by that is humans actually love drama.
Right.
Not all of us, but a lot of people.
Maybe all of us do.
Maybe in some sense all of us do, but humans,
because we all have an urge for like adventure,
a narrative,
drama. Yeah, for narrative. That's a great.
Adventure, narrative, some sort of story going on. So even you always hear people say, "Oh, I hate drama so much." Honestly, the people who say that the most usually are covering up that they actually kind of enjoy it. And that's not to slam anyone. Honestly, this is just a normal human tendency. But the drive towards conflict is so powerful because it just gives us something. It gives us something to latch onto in life. People who don't have, a family or significant other or a lot of friends or whatever it might be, this gives them their cause and their thing to ascribe to, saying that I am in this narrative. I have these ideas, and people who are against me, well, this is what my entire life is about. It's about the battle of good and evil, right? I mean, I talked about this in multiple different platforms, but the power of fiction and all these stories we've been taught since we were kids. It doesn't matter if it's biblical, if it's comical, if it's fictional, whatever it might be. But pretty much all stories boil down to a battle between good and evil. At the end of the day, you can pretty much take every single narrative down to that point, right? And so when people can assign themselves that meaning, and drama and conflict through that meaning, that's what makes things so partisan and powerful.
So are you trying to say that the essential aspect of human nature that drives all this is the desire to be on the good side of good and evil?
Yes.
Like that? Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
Because I know there's another approach which I like that kind of explains it also, which is just tribalism, like the ancient idea of tribalism.
Right. You want to expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Sure.
Yeah.
So tribalism is basically just, it's honestly, I didn't even know this word until I was describing an idea to our friend,
right,
Sally Evans, if you're watching this. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's tribalism," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that word before." But it's basically just the idea that that there's an essential drive, a natural human drive to associate with one group, specifically to the exclusion of all other groups. That you are this tribe, and that creates the tribal dynamic, which you see in American politics very, very openly, where it's nothing to do at all with truth seeking or anything like that. It's CNN, they had that whole project Veritas or something like that, where it's 100% just there's groups and people have a desire and a drive to be part of a group. So what you were saying, I really like, but it's a little altruistic, that people have a desire to be on the good side of the good versus evil paradigm.
I'll rephrase.
All right.
Good. I mean perceived good, not actual objective good, whatever objective good is.
So you're saying that they use that to fuel their tribalistic instincts?
Yes, they think they're right in their own mind. It doesn't make them right in general, but if they are convinced that they are right, then that is them on the side of good versus evil. It could be, for the record, it could be someone committing millions of dollars of tax fraud, right? But they think that what they're doing is okay.
Right. Well, that's very interesting that you're talking about that. And this is a whole nother tangent, so maybe I won't go into too much. But
you definitely should, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm studying political philosophy right now. Because I'm thinking about double majoring in political science just because it's very interesting.
Yeshiva and double majoring. Wow. That's a lot.
Well, I love reading the classics. It's very interesting because you got I'm reading Plato right now, and it's a modern translation, and it's super readable.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. But that's a whole, what you were just saying, that it's about what they can perceive as the good. That's an entire critique in Plato of the conventional morality, which is that people it's all about appearance. It's what you think. If you think someone else is good, it doesn't matter at all what they're doing, because the discussion in the book in Republic is about is morality innately good for a person? And the argument is that, well, from a conventional view of morality, no, because as long as you can hide the fact that you're immoral, but everyone thinks you're immoral, you'll always come out on top. You'll never lose, right? And so what you're saying is on a psychological level, a person needs to feel that they're good. They have an innate need to feel that they're good. So in order to fulfill that, they convince themselves that they're doing the right thing, or that this is good. So that now they've fulfilled that moral desire, that moral drive to be good.
It's self-validating.
Yeah, 100%. Just because they have that need to be good, and instead of actually trying to do it, a lot of people are very content to convince themselves that they have.
Yeah,
they've already done it.
Actually, this ties in really well to something I would. So we both work for this organization called NCSY, where we both teach Jewish children Jewish things. I love it. It's amazing. One of the best parts of my life. The story of how I became an NCSY advisor is very funny. Maybe I'll tell that later.
Mine too.
But really? Okay, we should definitely share that before the episode ends. Right. I was learning Pirkei Avot, which is the I believe the ethics of the fathers. Is that how you say it in English? With
ethics of the fathers.
With the kids that I tutor, and I won't get too into religious, like haji dodgy stuff, because not everyone who listens is Jewish, and so on.
What's
and so
the demographic, by the way? Like who's like how, like, can I say Hebrew words without translating them or no?
You might want to give a little context if you're saying a Hebrew word, okay, cool. which is totally fine.
No problem. Yeah.
But no, so there's this section of Pirkei Avot where different rabbis or sages are discussing what they think is essential to life. And what they think is the essential thing to hold and essential thing to have and the worst thing to possibly have, right? And this one rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Elazar, I'm not exactly sure. Feel free to fact check me on that. But he said the best thing to have in life is a good heart, and the worst thing to stay away from in life is a bad heart.
Yeah. And Elazar ben Azariah, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I did get it right. Huh, awesome. Okay. So that actually made me take a few steps back and realize, the word heart is almost always used in a positive connotation or context. But just because someone has a heart doesn't mean it's slanted towards good. And for the record, we're not talking about the actual thing that's beating, blood through your body, but the metaphysical concept of a heart, of a soul, or whatever it might be.
Nicely put.
Yeah, it's just because someone has that, we all have that. Everyone has a form of heart. Right. People who say to people who are unemotional or unempathetic or whatever it might be, whatever narrative suits the thing, you don't have a heart. You're lacking in heart. No, they totally have a heart. It just might not be bent towards good things. Right.
Yeah. Well, you're basically saying that everyone has passion.
Yeah.
Everyone has passion.
But not everyone uses it properly, obviously. Everyone has a slant towards something.
But I think everyone does have the need to feel, to think, they have to trick themselves at least that they're doing the right thing. I don't think anyone is, there probably are. Hey, I guess there probably are people that are just evil, that like being evil.
Yeah.
I guess there probably are people like that.
But in some sense, those people are probably telling themselves that, the people that I'm doing this to deserve it because they're weaker, or I've been downtrodden.
But are there people you think that are actually evil, that are like, this is wrong? And I mean, like satanic, satanic people, right? It's like satanic.
100%. Usually those people have like a background in their mind, though, that like, I know it's wrong, but like, it's not that bad,
Right.
But if you're saying,
or that the satanic way is like the right way of life.
Well,
it's like a kind of like a double step. It's like a two-step a Euro step basketball layup there.
Right.
To figure out that one.
No, but people, I'm sure there are people out there that are just purely evil and they know what they're doing is wrong and they keep doing it. But I would say that most people find some sort of root justification for what they're doing.
Right.
So this is definitely really fascinating stuff. Because human nature is always, like I said, it's both predictable and unpredictable at the same time. At the beginning of this episode, I talked about how I don't like how shoving people in boxes, it's not that great. But at the same time, we can't deny that there are predictable measures of human nature, right?
Right, 100%. And that's kind of like it's an interesting line to draw, because it's definitely a waste of time to try to like generalize about a lot of things and say that, everyone is this, everyone is that. But I think that there are certain core human tendencies that are probably like okay to talk about. And you know what? We probably don't know enough about them that it's like reasonable for us.
I'm not telling you I'm some genius. Yeah, this is just my ideas.
But like, I think the idea of tribalism is something that a scientist wouldn't be like, well, what are you trying to describe human nature for?
Tribalism?
Like,
what are you talking about? Where?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a fundamental human nature, point of human nature.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff ties into what we were talking about a little bit before we started the show. And that's this realm of cognition and how humans tend to perceive things. Right. Now, this is one of those topics that I really don't want to make sure I don't bore the audience. So where the goal is, this is very humanly oriented. This is something that will apply to literally anyone listening. OK, so we're not going to get super esoteric in what we discuss. I like that word a lot, esoteric. So I just finished my cognitive. Well, do you want to give a little bit of a background to the people of what cognitive psychology is? What defines it?
Well, so I think it's easier to start with the definition of the word cognition,
Yep.
right? Which is the processes of not the physical processes. It's not a neurochemical or anything like that science. It's just like the processes that your brain goes through in achieving anything. So if you want to see something, how does your brain a picture comes in, and then how does it get to what part of the brain, and then like how do you understand what that is and what does that mean to you, and like how does that translate to action, that type of thing, like that whole process. And then also with more kind of just thought oriented things, like how do you understand something, when you recall a memory, what is the process, like do you retrieve, is it that you have like an imprint in your brain that you then go look at, or do you have to like recreate, is it like the neurons firing off and trying to like recreate exactly what it did in the last time that you had a similar simulation, you know? So it's that whole science. And then cognitive sciences covers that as a general thing. Cognitive psychology is one of the many fields, including computer sciences and neuroscience, that contribute to the field of cognitive science, with an understanding, in our case, from a psychological perspective. So, you know, a cognitive psychologist will do experiments like the last two groups of people to try to remember a word. And in each situation, one of them will be given a related word, word to remember at the same time, and the other person won't. And they'll see like, how does that affect, you know, their reaction time?
Right.
But a computer scientist will be like creating computer programs to try to simulate what the human brain does to figure out exactly what's going on. So it's a super cool field. My cousin's actually a professor of cognitive science at the U of A.
Really?
Yeah, so it's a very cool, very interesting. He's a neuropsychologist, and he's now a professor of cognitive science.
Yeah, my sister wants to go
like
into neuropsychology, so
Cool.
I hear about that stuff a lot around here too.
Right.
Yeah, so it's fascinating, and honestly, this is sort of, I guess there's a lot of myths that people don't even know they believe about human memory and how we perceive things.
Yeah.
That I definitely want to talk about. One of these big ones is that is memory. Memory is something that we all rely on every day, right? I mean, to talk to you in this discussion, I have to remember things like words and topics and specific instances that I can relate to you, right? We're all using memory all the time. There's no need to prove that. But the question is, are the memories that we are calling upon in active situations actually reflective and accurate? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. This is something I learned in honestly Psych 1010 that I learned later in my cognition class a lot more. But most of the memories that we have in our head, those stories that we tell people, you know, like the really fermented ideas and the things that we know happen to us, actually
episodic memory,
exactly. Those are the memories that tend to be the least accurate, especially the more you recall them. So if you have a specific story from when you were 9 years old, right, and you tell that story all the time over a process of years, the story is actually going to become less and less accurate from its original point. There's multiple reasons for that. The first thing, which I like to tell people, is obviously it's going to be inaccurate because when you tell a story, you tell it in third person. You don't tell it in first person. You see yourself in a situation and how it was happening, right?
Right.
But we don't see in third person. We see in first person. So that already slants the metric to a different sort of realm.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe you could talk a little more about episodic memory.
Yeah. I mean, wow, that's a great introduction there for cognitive about memory. That's like a perfect introduction about memory. So I think that it's like important to distinguish between a few different types of memory. So there's recall, which is what you were just talking about. That's what most people think of, like, oh, do you have a good memory? It's like, how well can you recall things? How well can you quote a movie that you've seen, you know? Like how well can you bring up a memory to the surface and then repeat it over or just think about it? That's recall. But there's also recognition, which is like if you see, and that's something that I can tell you personally, my recall is mediocre. My recognition is way better.
That's
way
association
better. Like
of something that you see, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So like a multiple choice exam, like you see the question, you see 4 answers, and you remember when you see it that, oh yeah, that's the one. Like, you know, I'll remember when I see it. That's recognition. And then there's another divide to make between implicit and explicit memory, right? So implicit memory is memory that goes on without you consciously attempting to recall the thing, right? So recall is not implicit. Recall is you're consciously recalling the memory. You have to say, okay, what did I do yesterday? And you have to think, okay, so I did this and then that. You have to consciously bring it to the surface. Whereas a recognition task, or what, like there's also implicit recall, but implicit memory that's under the surface, that's just when you recognize something, you see it and your mind does it. You're not thinking, have I seen this before? You just all of a sudden know that you've seen it, right?
It's like breathing. You're not putting any effort into breathing until I mention it, obviously. Then you're going to think about your breathing. Right. But yeah, it's automatic.
So yeah, exactly. So I think that the important thing to notice in that difference between implicit and I think it's called explicit, but I'm not sure. Just explicit memory. An important difference between those two things is that, and the fact that you can have an implicit memory shows, I think, that you do have things stored in your brain, right? Meaning, from what you were saying, it's very possible, just from hearing your description of how a person can create a memory. Basically, you might say that it's largely created, and that you're just creating this scenario that you have a few details that you might have remembered somehow, whatever, but you're largely just creating it over again and then giving it over. But the fact
generating it and regenerating it over and over.
Exactly. But the recognition test, the fact that you can look at something and immediately know that you've seen it before and know what it is, and the fact that right now we're talking and we're describing these concepts without necessarily trying, well, I guess we are recalling them, but there is, like you said, you can breathe without thinking about it, right? You just do it. There is memory can be stored clearly in a more concrete way.
Yep.
I think that's clear. And I think the problem is that people ignore their actual memories, not even consciously, like 100% subconsciously. When they recall something, they're doing a lot more generation and a lot less going in and pulling out their imprinted memory.
Right.
Because and for example, people can. This is crazy. There's some of the tests they do in psychology are insane. They did this test. I forgot who the researcher was, but people with an impaired, they're blind basically. Yeah. But they're blind because the part of their brain which processes the information was damaged in like an accident or something. But the occipital lobe, the part or I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I only ever read it. Occipital, because I've only ever read it because it just sounds like right. So the occipital lobe. That part of the brain that, and I'm sorry, this is like super long-winded, but
no, it's totally fine.
Finish my point in a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so that the part of the brain that that recorded the information was actually fine. It was a physical damage that just touched the wrong part of the brain, but the person was able to see things, but they didn't actually, they weren't consciously aware of seeing them, right? And this is how they proved that. The way they prove that you can see something and not be aware that you've seen it is with these types of people that have this damage in their brain. So the way they proved it is they would show them an image which they couldn't see, right? You know, they weren't able to see it, or at least that's what they said, I guess, but they weren't able to see it. And then they would give them recall tests. For example, they would say like they would give them like a chart of like 10 different things and tell them to circle one of them, and however they statistically figure it out, the proportion of things that were circled that were the things that were shown to them, right? So if they showed them a boat and then they show them a chart of like a boat, a duck, a dog, and like 15 other things, the proportion of people and times that the right thing was circled was such that there's heavy reason to suspect that you can see something and not be aware of the fact that you've seen it, and have a memory that is then effective in your actions later on. So we have the ability to use the actual imprinted memory in our brains. We just mess it over by going in there and trying to generate this story. Right. And doing that too much, you end up diluting the actual memory.
Yep. And thank you. Very, very thorough explanation on those forms of memory.
Very long-winded. Sorry.
I've done longer. Don't worry. Okay. And also, a lot of this comes into the concept of schemas, which I actually really like talking about. And we will discuss in just 1 minute after talking about our mid-break sponsor. So, in addition to EV Direct, this week's episode of the Communal Conversation is sponsored by our good friends over at Custom by Shara. Looking for a gift to give your friend, family, or significant other? Want something unique and personalized for any occasion? Custom by Shara delivers custom, complex, hand-drawn portraits of anyone and everyone at affordable costs. Check out @Custom by Shara on Instagram to place your order and tell them we sent you. Once again, check out @Custom by Shara on Instagram and place your order today. Okay, so
Custom by Shara.
Custom by Shara. Yep.
The OG sponsors of the Communal Conversation.
Been around since the dawn of the show. Not going anywhere, I don't think. I hope.
Right.
And yeah, so you know the conversation's serious if the glasses are coming off. For those listening.
Well, I mean, I was just seeing how sunny it is, but it's a little too sunny.
Yep. Actually,
my left eye.
For those who are listening just auditorily, I'm sorry that you're missing out on this beautiful sight here, because I'm nice indoors and he is outdoors. It's a very nice dichotomy here. Which probably. Yeah. And there was actually something I briefly wanted to mention before we get into the other topic. Last week's episode, because we're just talking about auditory listening, for some reason didn't get uploaded to Apple Podcasts. I don't know what happened. Apple seemed to block it, maybe because I talked about Star Wars or Justin Trudeau or something with copyright. Oh, and great, I said the buzzwords again, so maybe this one will get blocked too. But
that'd be crazy.
For some reason, yeah, this one did not upload to Apple Podcasts. I apologize. I was looking at my analytics on who listens episode to episode, and I saw there was a huge drop on last week's episode, the 10th episode, which I did solo, right? I was like, what is going on there? And half my audience listens on Apple Podcasts, and it wasn't on Apple Podcasts. So for those who would like to check out the 10th episode, which I did alone, feel free to do it on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts. I'll try to re-upload it to Apple Podcasts, but I can't really guarantee anything. I just wanted to briefly mention that. I don't really know what happened there. Mm-hmm. We're all slaves to the algorithms, right?
Yes, we are.
Anyway, okay, so schemas. Schemas are defined as these, I guess, preconceived notions, probably the best way to define them. These predefined ways of perceiving. I feel like I'm saying a lot of big words that.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I would use it that way.
Oh, really?
I would describe it that way.
Okay.
I think that's a result of what a schema is, that you end up having preconceived notions. I think a schema is just it's a perception. It's an organization that you do on a perceptual level.
Okay.
So that when you think about something, you think about that and so many other associated emotions and things and other facts and whatever. And then because of that, when you think of like Justin Trudeau, it's like you have this whole image of what Justin Trudeau is.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have this grouping, this organization that's going on in your mind, and it happens.
You're right.
Yeah. That's why the reason I object is because it happens on a perceptual level. It's not like just a preconceived notion. It's literally the way that two people can look at the same event and have a completely different takeaway. So
that's actually what I want to get to. You're right. The actual definition of schema is more the grouping and association.
Sorry for nerding out on you.
No. Hey, it's good to have accurate terms on here. But a result of this sort of grouping is, like you said, two people can look at the exact same thing and perceive it completely differently, which is kind of weird, right? Like,
crazy.
I don't know. Let's make an example right here. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this. Oh, my headphone wire is really short. Hold on.
Ooh, no. Everyone Yosef Zeldman is gone. He'll be back in a moment. He's back now.
This Batman action figure. Okay, this is an action figure that I purchased from Amazon in June of 2019, and I like it a lot, and I think it's really cool. However, maybe
can you put it a little closer?
Oh yeah. All right, just for show and tell the audience here. Here's my Batman action figure, classic from the I believe the 70s Neil Adams run. Yeah,
guy's totally jacked.
So 100%. So I like this action figure quite a bit, but someone could look at this action figure and maybe as a child they were hit in the head with a blunt Batman figure and had brain damage, and because of that predefined schema, all Batman figures are automatically bad and associated with bad memories.
Yeah.
Now, that was a very weird example because I'm being a little improv, but in general, it's this idea that because you've experienced a certain thing, you group it with other experiences, and then the way you look at the world is entirely defined through that schema. And I honestly think that gets us into trouble quite a bit, because what happens is we look at things and we refuse to see them on a new level. We only associate them with our prior experiences. Something I like to give as an example, this is pretty dark, so forgive me. But my dad passed when I was 10 from a drug overdose and from suicide. And I've experienced that and I went through that, right? But for me to say afterwards that, because my father committed suicide and it was drug related, every single suicide must be drug related, right? Mm-hmm. That is not an argument I would like to make. Ever.
Right.
But there are many people who would make those sort of arguments, that they think because they've experienced one thing, that is the only way to experience that thing, and everyone else's experience of that sort of thing is invalidated.
Right.
And I don't know. You probably see this around you, right?
I mean, yeah, it's just that their perception of the thing is just like, seriously, honestly, understanding the cognitive psychological explanation of it is very helpful. It's just when they look at it, like that's what that means to them, you know, like you said with the Batman figure, that's what a Batman figure is. It's a dangerous thing. And like with COVID, I've seen him, you can see it like very clearly with COVID. Because some people look at it and they're terrified of it, and some people look at it and they're not scared of it. It's the same thing, and you have people in the same risk categories. Yep. And it's just how they look. It's and they're not necessarily getting different facts even, you know. A lot of people, maybe they watch Fox or CNN, but I know people that like just in my shul, there's such a divide between how people think about it. Like there's everywhere, you know, there's different people that think about it differently. And I don't think it's so easy to say like, oh yeah, it's because he listens to Fox, he listens to CNN. Like I think people just approach, and you know, do you have any Russian listeners, by the way?
Maybe one or two.
Okay, so this is not like a controversial thing, but I think a lot of people that who experienced communist Russia are probably, their perception of what a government is probably I probably don't understand it. I'm probably not able to relate to that at all, of what their schema is of a government. Right. So when the government says stay at home and, you know, check your phone to find out if you can go to the gym or not, like one person who grew up in Canada can see that as like, okay, the government's taking care of me, right? But a person who grew up in communist Russia, they're not seeing a different government. It's just that their schema of what a government is terrifying. Yeah. And rightfully so. So yeah, schemas are huge, man. They're the most, they change people's lives. They are people's lives.
Yeah, and I find it a lot with advice that even sometimes I give to people, but people give to me, where, you know, if I don't know, let's say I was talking about I was talking to my friend Ben, who and I said, Ben, I would like to go to Tim Hortons today and get what do I like from there? A mixed berry smoothie. Those are very good. And Ben said to me, no, you shouldn't do that, because this one time I had a mixed berry smoothie and it was the worst thing I've ever tasted. So you should definitely not go and have that. People do this all the time. Like if I talk to someone about, I want to go into psychology. Oh, well, I had a terrible experience with psychology, so I know how all of psychology works and you shouldn't do it.
Oh my God, you're bringing up a very good point.
Yeah,
wow.
It's such a closed-minded way of thinking that honestly a lot of us default to. Like sometimes I even do that. I'm not telling you I'm perfect. But,
100%.
But people think that because they have experienced something in a certain way, everyone else will automatically experience that same thing in that same way, which is just completely untrue.
Preposterous.
Yeah, ooh, that's a good word. Preposterous. Actually, something really funny about long words. I like to use big words in things, especially in essays. I hope York isn't listening, but for the philosophy and history essays, you gotta fluff it up. So my friends who are probably listening, my friends Nathaniel and Aaron and I, at the beginning of the year, we put together a Google Doc. It's a long Google Doc of a bunch of different long words. It's called A Plethora of Pretentious Pretenses.
That's good. I like that. It's a good name.
There's a lot of stuff on there. Like, I actually used hitherto unironically in an essay, which I definitely regret that one.
Hitherto, I use hence a lot in my essays.
Hence or henceforth. Yeah, that's
henceforth. Well, I don't know if I ever use henceforth.
Yeah.
But I do use some interesting their kind of confabulations. I can't think of it. Like therefore, similar to that. Like what's an example? Like I don't know. Can't think of any. Cut this part out of the episode.
Therefore is like a cause and effect sort of thing. Like because this happened, therefore this. And
henceforth. Is that the one you just said? Henceforth.
Yeah. All this to say that I like big words. So big word of the day for everyone listening. Sesquipedalian. SESQUIPEDILAN. I think that word, which you will never use in your entire life, actually describes the use of long words. Sesquipedalian means to be long-worded or using long words, which is hilarious because it's a long-ass word. But I'm getting a little off topic here.
I remembered the word, by the way.
Oh yeah, what you got?
Yes, the word is. Oh, are you kidding me? I slipped my mind again. It's so hard to remember. It's they're from like anything from the of a certain thing.
Oh, anything from that. Oh, interesting. I've never heard that.
Or they're from. I'm pretty sure that's the word, but I honestly could have been a different word. It keeps on slipping in and out of my mind.
No worries. That's a tip of the tongue phenomena. Another cognition.
Exactly.
Another
yes.
cognitive
It's like
phenomena.
I was so surprised. Like everyone's experienced that. It's like a huge area of research in psychology.
Yeah, you think
it's just called the tip of the tongue.
Exactly.
Phenomena.
I was going to say you think tip of the tongue is just like some sort of phrase people throw around, but it's actually a phenomenon in psychology where people have these
TITP.
Like, yeah. Right. That's
or
remember,
TOTP or something.
I remember reading that in my cognition textbook. Like, oh, that's actually a thing.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, no. So the overall point I was trying to make was that when people make generalizations because of their own personal experience, it often can. It doesn't result in good things usually, because first of all it ends up with you being a lot more closed-minded to things in the world, because since only you've experienced them in that. And by the way, for the record, that's true of things that people have only experienced once and then not again, right? Like people who do I don't know, one roller coaster and they hate it, will never try a single other form of roller coaster ever again, even though your experience with one roller coaster and a different roller coaster could be completely different. But you make a generalization based off that one experience, right?
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's and it's like it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of similar to like the Jewish concepts of gaiva and anavos, like being humble or being what's the translation of gaiva?
Haughty, I guess.
Haughty, yeah. Haughty. I don't like that word.
I don't like
haughty.
That word either. Boastful
boastful, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's like a dispositionary. I think it's very dispositional.
Yeah.
Like, how do you approach things? You know, do you approach your view of the world as being like, we kind of touched on this at the beginning of the podcast, like
dominant or superior, right?
Yeah. And like, this is just, but it's like on it transcends everything. It just permeates through every single conversation and every single thought process. It's just who people are. It's a tendency that we all have, as I should say, in every area, that we just like, people are just, their perceptions are the truth. That's reality, right? What they see is the way that it is. But it's like, it's really not like, I told my friend like a few days ago, like, you know, what I was doing, or a few weeks ago, what I was doing, what my plans were. And, you know, his reaction is just like, oh, you know, a lot of people take psychology. I was like, okay, thanks, man. Like, I know a lot of people take psychology, and that's, but like, that's how he sees, you know, some people just see, that's how they see things.
Right.
Like,
oh, he's a psych major, as in he's not going to do anything with his life. Trust me, I've heard it too.
Yeah. And honestly, to some degree, people that talk like that are just not willing to do some perspective taking, probably. Yeah. Which is not, it's like a whole other issue, besides for the schema thing. But like, for sure, the schema thing, it just, and you know, I was just talking to my rabbi in Edmonton about this yesterday, about humility, and how humility is like the key to, the only way to gain knowledge is to be humble enough to like,
because when you're humble, you accept that you're wrong. And when you're wrong on things, that's how you learn the most.
Right. Exactly. Like, to be curious, you need to be humble.
Yeah, right.
So I was like, what's a good like Torah source for that? So he sent me from Tainus Daf Sheva Daf Zion. So the 7th page of Maseches Tainus. And it's like, I think it's a pretty famous one, but it's like that the Torah is like water, because in order to gain from the Torah, you need to be in a low place, and it needs to flow like down to you. You have to be humble in order to receive knowledge and wisdom, and to be curious, you need to be humble. Yeah,
of course. It makes complete sense. I mean, not just on a biblical level, but on a psychological level, that you have to be humble to accept that things aren't always what you think them to be. And I think if I could give like anyone general advice, it's that. It's when you're experiencing something, don't necessarily paint that specific thing with your experience, and you know, generalize it to all of humanity, or even your re-experience of that sort of thing. I think we tend to do this a lot, where because you've experienced something, you know something, you've met someone, so on and so forth, and you've had an experience that we defaulted to thinking this is the only way to look at it. I think through humility, for the record, and through humbleness, and taking a step back and saying, well, maybe this is not the entire way to experience that. I think that's how a lot of us actually gain perspective. Like that. I don't think that's how a lot of us gain perspective, is by taking a few steps back and recognizing that our image or view of things is not always dominant, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just objectivity, being able to look at things objectively, to detach yourself from the thing that you're looking at.
Objectivity is a tough one, because I think I've talked about this on the show before, and I've definitely gotten responses to it, and feel free to disagree with me. I actually don't think humans have the ability to think objectively. I think we can always strive towards it. We should always strive to be objective. But actually being someone who's completely disconnected from bias or other thoughts or like schemas, whatever it might be, I don't think that's possible on a human level. Even the top intellectual thinkers have some level of bias, and they will admit it to you. There's no one in their right mind who will tell you that they are unbiased unless they're frankly ignorant. Like someone who tells you that they're 100% unbiased is ignorant to their actual human nature, I think. Anyway,
right. Maybe because the world's too complicated.
Yep.
And to formulate an actual opinion out of it.
Right, and we always need to have like our own. How do I say this? I was going to bring this up earlier, but the fact that we need our own way of explaining the world has been true since the dawn of man. Where in the hunter-gatherer days, where let me just say, there was not a lot of doubt and anxiety in the hunter-gatherer days. Right. You just went and you did things, and you for your family, and you survived, and you scavenged, and those bits of human history are still left in us to some extent.
Right, like existential panic of being murdered while you're hunting.
Right, that's transferred now into the parasympathetic nerve system, which
well, that's like an evolutionary view of things.
Yeah, exactly. Which the discussion of evolution and
well, that I think that element of evolution is just probably true.
Yeah,
you know, it's not against the Torah at all.
No, that's actually something. That's something that I really don't like, is that people always put it doesn't matter what religion you're from, like Bible and science in completely different categories. It's so untrue. There's so many. First of all, there's so many biblical proofs for science, and there's so many scientific proofs for biblical biblical notations.
We can have a whole podcast about that.
Yeah,
then.
Right. All right. Well, maybe next time. But that's just something I just wanted to briefly say, because I think people put those two into dichotomous way too often.
Well, I think it's because they view the Torah and the religious standpoint as the way they heard it when they were in kindergarten and first grade.
Right.
So it's like, what do you mean Adam and Chava were like, you know, it can't be true that they were hunter-gatherers because they were in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
Like, obviously, like the first couple even if you believe in a very literal interpretation of the Bible, it's just ridiculous to think that the first couple generation of mankind, maybe you could say after they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, but to say that they weren't like hunter-gatherers or like cavemen kind of people.
Yeah.
Like, who else would have been the cavemen? Like, we know that there were cavemen, so
right. And so those so those remnants of evolutionary biology, which I believe you briefly alluded to, is something that you actually like to study, right? The biological basis for things.
Well, I'm very interested in it. I haven't really studied it that much, though.
Okay, that's fine.
It's a whole nother spectrum of study.
Yeah. My
field.
I have friends that took a biological basis in behavior course this year, and apparently it was.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do some of those courses, but like I want to. Yeah, I'm not in that actual course, but in that actual program.
And we talked about tribalism earlier, and obviously that's a huge element of hunter gathering and what humans sort of used to be like. So yeah, it's always interesting looking at where these sort of stuff comes from. So. Yeah, well, that's a lot of psychology topics in one episode, don't you think?
Yeah, well, we can talk about it's all of life. So.
Yeah, right. That's actually something I'm hoping for this episode, is that it's not too boring, because everyone can relate to anything we're talking about, because it's innate in human nature. And man, you know, with some films, there's like a swear counter. I wish there was a human nature counter for this episode, because we've said it like 50 gazillion times, which is totally fine.
Right? It just happened to be. Wonder why.
Yep. There are a bunch of words we probably said a bunch of times. But before we round up the episode, which I won't do immediately, I do actually want to talk about NCSY a little. This organization we both work for, and how you and I came to be a part of it. So why don't you tell your story first, and then I'll go with mine.
Well, how I came to be a part of it, honestly, I never really had anything to do with it. Like through high school, nothing to do with it. I went to Israel.
Actually, we should probably establish a little what NCSY is.
Oh, right.
For those who don't know. And NCSY is a big organization dedicated to bringing Jews closer to Judaism. And what I mean by that is bring kids who are maybe less religious, because for those who don't know, there's a difference between cultural Judaism and religious Judaism. I mean, they go hand in hand, but you have some people that are completely culturally Jewish and not religiously Jewish, as in they have a Jewish identity, Jewish parents, but Judaism has a lot of laws, 613 of them, and there are kids or families who don't necessarily keep all those laws, which is totally fine. That's what NCSY is for. It's to bring the people who aren't as religious closer to religion, right? And it's usually teenagers, youths in the program, sometimes way younger, middle school, elementary school, and it's usually with parents wanting their kids to be fostered in a more religious environment, right? And so that's what NCSY I think is foundationally, unless. Am I misdefining that or?
No.
Okay.
That's great.
So
yeah. So I didn't have anything to do with it in high school, and then I went to Israel and nothing to do with it, and then I came back, and then sure, you know Shoshi Bernstein from Hamilton?
No, but
or from Edmonton, but she's like NCSY Hamilton. Okay, yeah.
Sure.
So you're in Toronto, right?
Yeah, I'm in Vaughan.
Oh, goodbye. Yeah. So she runs NCSY Hamilton, I think, or in some capacity, and they needed like an advisor to teach Learn and Earn. Do you guys do Learn and Earn?
Yep.
So it's like a once a week the kids come and they have a Torah class and they get like a stipend for doing it.
Yep.
So yeah, they needed like an extra person to teach. So I got involved like that. And then NCSY is like super, like the second that you agree to teach, it's like sending you, like you're in these group chats and there's like all these events that are happening and whatever. And like you can come on and ask questions. So yeah, that's basically how I got involved. But I mean, thank God it's been a very good experience. Like I just recently, I was putting on tefillin with my kids. Like this is my Chabad influence. We were putting on tefillin. Right. With these me and the kids that I learn with once a week. So like that we would learn on Thursday night, then on Friday morning we would put on tefillin together, and then I challenged them to put on every day for a month, like for a gift, whatever, for a prize. And one of them decided at the end of it that they were going to buy their own pair and start wearing every day.
Wow.
I was like, oh, dang, like that was super successful.
That's the impact right there. For those who don't know, tefillin are the leather boxes and straps that Jews tie around their heads once a day.
Yeah.
And arms.
I think, honestly, like I was thinking about this before the show, that I hope we get to talk about this, because like the fact that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe,
the leader of the Chabad movement,
Yeah. So he that was his not like one of his number one things was that every Jewish male needs to wear tefillin.
Yep.
And it's like have you read the book Rebbe by Joseph Zeldman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I read that book and I was like, wow, like it made me much more appreciative of the Rebbe, of his like who he was and just the brilliance and like just incredible character that he was.
Yep.
So like the fact that he was like, that was a number one thing for him, is that every Jewish male should wear tefillin. Like I'm so happy that this kid is going to start doing it.
That's honestly, that's really great work. I'm very happy that you're able to accomplish that. Yeah.
It was this kid. It wasn't me. It was
right. And actually, the fact you say that is very, very good. I always do that whenever I give advice to people and then they accomplish something. I never say like, that's my credit. That's you. You had the power to do that all along. You just needed the right push. It's you who accomplished that, not my advice, right? And that's how we should all look at things. So I think that's great. But yeah,
you opened the gate for them.
Yeah, exactly. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, for those who don't know, is the leader of the Chabad movement, which is a sect of Orthodox Judaism. And unlike other sects, and once again, this is not to bash anyone of any sect of Judaism. I have friends all over the spectrum, so it's no problem. But Chabad was very based on outreach, still is very based on outreach. And their goal was to bring Judaism to as many Jews as possible, in even the smallest capacity as possible. Because under Chabad belief and under general Jewish belief also, they're not in contrast, or dichotomous, I should say.
Nice word.
But they're not up against each other. But the goal of Chabad overall is to bring Jews closer to Judaism in even the smallest ways, like someone who doesn't keep kosher, which is the food laws of Judaism, right? Let's say someone eats a bacon cheese sandwich, but that morning they also put on tefillin. That putting on tefillin, that's a good deed. That's a mitzvah, is the Hebrew word for good deed, or good action. And no matter what that person does later, that good deed never goes away. It never, ever goes away. Sins can always be erased. Good deeds are never erased, right? And so that's this entire idea of Chabad and getting more people to subscribe to ideology, and Lubavitcher was a big part of that. So I think that's awesome. I want to definitely talk about my story in terms of coming into NCSY. So I was at and for the record, you talking about once you're in, you're in. Yeah, we both get the same texts on the same
so
groups.
All of a sudden, it's like summer camp, and what are you doing next year?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you have 5 minutes now. Great. Do this and that, and also
Exactly.
that. It's fun. No complaints. I love it. But and for the record, we both do it on a volunteer basis. Neither of us are paid to do this, as far as I know.
Right.
So. Yeah, my story with the NCSY is kind of funny. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this on the podcast, but which is some of my NCSY kids might actually be listening, which is funny because I know some of the kids listen to the podcast. But I was at, so there's this organization in Toronto called JLIC. JLIC is the Orthodox Student Union, something like that.
Okay.
Basically, it's a way for Orthodox university students to meet up and do events and sort of stuff. And so in September of 2020, they had a barbecue, a welcome back to school barbecue, right? And so I went with a bunch of friends, and it was great. It was really fun, good times. I mean, COVID definitely made it really weird, but whatever. I got to see a lot of people I hadn't seen since high school.
Right.
It was good. For the record, I didn't go on gap year. I skipped past the gap year and just went straight into school. Multiple reasons for that. Actually, funny enough, that was, so I went to Yeshivat Or Chaim, which is a modern Orthodox Jewish day school. Gap year is basically like, they push that on everyone, essentially. Like, that's like making aliyah. That's a big part of the school's belief. Funny enough, the rabbis and the teachers unanimously said to me that I don't need it, that I already have religious perspective. For me, I should go straight to university. You feel like you'd be wasting time doing a gap year. And listen, when the rabbis and the principals, when the rabbis and the principals tell me that, I'm like, I'm not going to question that. So I jumped, which is, it's a product of a few different things, but I did go on a bit of an interesting religious journey that I talked about in episode 7 of the podcast with Chaya Stedman.
Right,
so if anyone wants to check that out, but sorry, I'm getting totally sidetracked. This JLIC barbecue, I'm hanging out with a couple of my friends, Nathaniel and Aaron, who I referenced earlier, and this recruiter. I don't know if we should say her by name. Let's call her Alice. Okay, let's call her Alice. It's not a real name, but we're going to call her Alice. All right. Okay. So Alice approaches me and Aaron and Nathaniel, and she says, "Hi, I'm Alice from NCSY, and we're looking for recruits to be advisors and mentors for NCSY, which is, like we said, the peer mentoring sort of program." And Aaron and Nathaniel are kind of like, not really interested. You know, it's the people walking around with clipboards and asking you to fill out a survey. Usually, people kind of turn away from them. That's actually a quote from one of my favorite Broadway plays, "Oh Hello" on Broadway. It's very, very good. It's a quote. One of the characters says, "Sometimes life just passes me by like I'm holding a clipboard for gay rights." It's a good line. Anyway, so my friends reject this, and I also reject it, but I obviously reject it in my stupidly humorous way, and I laugh. I visibly laugh, and I say, "Trusting me with mentoring children is like trusting a baby with a gun."
And they probably didn't take that very well. I know who the person is. So.
Hear me out. This is where the story gets funny. So, and recruiter Alice, she was sort of like, "What? Huh?" I said, "That's my way of saying sorry, not really interested." And she's like, "Oh, okay." She walks away. Later.
Oh, it wasn't that. Okay, I didn't know who it was.
Later, I'm talking with my friends Chaya and Shara and some other people. And
Custom by Shara.
Yes, talking with my friends, Custom by Shara. And this lady recruiter, calling her Alice, approaches me again. She comes up behind me and she looks at me and she says, "You know, I think you really have it." And I turn to her and I say, "It? What? I have it? What's it?" She said, "Yeah, you know, I think you'd be really good at mentoring. I think you have definitely the charisma and the stature for it." I'm like, I look at her, I say, "After that joke I just made to you out loud, you think I would be good at mentoring children?" She said, "Yeah, you know, I think you really have the tendencies. You know, I think you could totally work this sort of thing out." And so I'm very taken aback, and I turn to my friend Chaya and I say, "Look, Chaya, Alice here thinks it would be a good idea for me to mentor children." And I'm expecting her to laugh it off like a good friend. Of course she doesn't, and she says, "Oh yeah, Yosef, you'd be really, really good at that." And I'm like, "No, it's not. I didn't want you to say that." But
you got hooked in.
And then I got hooked in at that point. And Chaya said, "Yeah, she's also an NCSY advisor." And she said that would be a good idea for you. And then I talked.
And there's no way out.
At that point, I got to talking with the recruiter a little more. I gave her my phone and email, which, once again, once you're in, you're in. I thought about it a little more, did the interview process and such, and I decided that it was a very, very good idea for my life. And seriously, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. It's given me a lot of perspective.
Really?
Oh, yeah. No question.
Cool.
It's definitely one of the best things I've added to my life. But it's very interesting how I got there. You wouldn't think with a joke like that someone would hear you out, let alone come back to you, insisting that you would be good at mentoring children. But I guess my jokes.
Well, Alice is a very good advisor, director, or recruiter. So
absolutely, no question. I just wanted to talk about how both of us came to this organization.
That's cool. Why. I think they might think that I'm a criminal though, because like I was supposed to send them like a criminal record when I signed up, because they didn't know who I was or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, I don't really know. I just didn't do it. I was like, I don't have a criminal record.
Me neither.
Like,
no, don't worry. If you don't have a criminal record, there's nothing to send in. You know.
Like what do you want me to send? Like a piece of paper that says I don't have a criminal record? Like,
as long as they don't know that I commit tax fraud on a repeated basis to afford my Lego, then I think we're good. So,
God forbid, don't say such things. He's joking, everyone.
I say such things because they're funny. Anyway, so we have reached the end of our episode. We did a nice little over an hour here. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, we can definitely have you back. And if you're ever in Vaughan, which I don't know if that'll ever happen, let me know, because I would love to have you ever. Yeah, Vaughan, whatever you want to call it.
VAUGN, right?
VAUGHAN.
Oh, yeah. What?
Yeah, no. There's an H in there. I know.
I was so confident that I had that.
It's okay. You've changed your schema on Vaughn. So with that being said, where can people find you? Do you want to be found? Is there something you'd like to advertise?
Not particularly. No, nope. I don't have anything to advertise.
No worries. All right. Well, that's totally fine. But I am going to do the advertising because that's what we do on the show. So if you are not following the Communal Conversation on Instagram, you should definitely do that to get the latest updates and news related to the episode. I recently did a poll on my story asking people if they want the podcast to be released Sunday or Tuesday. Sunday was the old release date. Tuesday is the new release date. People seem to overwhelmingly vote for Sunday, and I'm releasing the episode on Tuesday. But I think in the future we're probably going to move back to the Sunday date, and it makes more sense. People have more time to listen during the weekend, so I totally understand that. If you're watching this video on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We got quite a few subscribers last time because I mentioned that like 45% of the people who listen to the podcast fully aren't subscribed to the channel, which doesn't make any sense at all. So definitely subscribe. Lets me know that you're enjoying the videos. If you have any questions for the next episode you want to address with me and the guests, or any topics that are of your interest, please feel free to let me know. And thank you to our sponsors, EV Direct and Custom by Shara. Any closing words? Anything you want to leave with us, Dovi?
No, it's nice being on here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, very happy to have you on. Okay, that is the 11th episode of the Communal Conversation closing out.